She never imagined her 18th birthday would end with a signature binding her to a monster. Mariah Sterling stood in the marble hall of Seoul's most feared mafia compound, her trembling hands clutching a contract she couldn't read, while Seo Junwoo, cold, lethal, impossibly beautiful, watched her with eyes that promised both destruction and salvation. When his fingers brushed hers to take the pen, something ancient and irrevocable awakened in his chest, a hunger that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with possession. She was his now, whether she knew it or not. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories TV, besties. I pray this new month brings you so many glad tidings. The grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight as Mariah's father signed away her future. She stood frozen in her yellow sundress, the one she'd worn to what she thought would be a simple family dinner in Seoul, not an arranged marriage to settle debts she didn't know existed. The Korean man across the table hadn't looked at her once during the negotiations, his attention fixed on documents and numbers while her world crumbled. Seo Junwoo was 40 years old, the owner of half of Seoul's underground empire, and apparently now her husband. His tailored black suit fit him like a second skin, his dark hair swept back to reveal a face carved from stone and shadows. When he finally lifted his gaze to hers, Mariah felt the air leave her lungs. "Sign it," her father urged, desperation coating every word. "Please, Mariah, it's done." Her hand shook as she took the pen. Junwoo's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or assessment. She was a problem to be managed, nothing more. The realization burned through her chest as she scrawled her name across the line. The next morning, Mariah woke in a bedroom larger than her entire London flat. Silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul, and a wardrobe filled with clothes in exactly her size. She didn't remember being brought here, only the car ride in suffocating silence and Junwoo's driver opening her door. A knock interrupted her panic. A woman in a crisp uniform entered with breakfast. "Mr. Seo will see you at noon in his office," she said in perfect English, then disappeared before Mariah could ask the 1,000 questions burning her throat. She spent the morning exploring her gilded cage. The penthouse was a masterpiece of modern luxury and traditional Korean aesthetics. Guards stood at every exit. When she tried to leave, they bowed respectfully, but blocked her path. At exactly noon, she was escorted to Junwoo's office. He sat behind an enormous desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean. He gestured for her to sit without looking at her. Mariah perched on the edge of the leather chair, her curvy frame tense, ready to run, though there was nowhere to go. When he ended the call, silence stretched between them. He studied her, with those unreadable eyes, taking in her natural curls, the defiant tilt of her chin despite the fear she couldn't quite hide, the curve of her hips in yesterday's sundress. "You will have everything you need," he said finally, his English accented but precise. "A credit card, a driver, security. You're free to go anywhere in Seoul during the day. At night, you stay here." "I'm not a pet," Mariah managed, her voice stronger than she felt. Something almost like amusement crossed his features. "No. You're my wife. There's a difference." That evening, he didn't come home. Mariah ate dinner alone in the vast dining room, served by silent staff who treated her like glass. She hated it. Hated him. Hated her father for his gambling debts and her helplessness in this foreign country, where she didn't speak the language or understand the rules. The following morning, she found a phone on her nightstand, top of the line, already programmed with numbers she might need. Junwoo's name sat at the top of the contacts. She threw it across the room. By the end of the week, she'd established a routine. Breakfast alone. Exploring Seoul with her assigned driver and bodyguard, a stoic man named Minho, who spoke little but watched everything. Return by sunset. Dinner alone. Sleep in her beautiful prison. Junwoo appeared and disappeared like smoke, sometimes gone for days, occasionally passing her in hallways with nothing more than a nod. But she felt him watching, always watching. A few days later, Mariah convinced Minho to take her to Hongdae, the artistic district. She needed color, life, something other than marble and silence. She wandered through street markets, her curves drawing appreciative glances she pretended not to notice, her dark skin glowing in the afternoon sun. That's when she met Daniel, an English teacher from Canada. He struck up a conversation at a cafe, his smile easy and warm. For an hour, she remembered what it felt like to be normal, to laugh, to forget the gold band on her finger that felt like a shackle. She didn't notice the black car idling across the street, didn't see Minho's phone call or the way he stepped closer, suddenly alert. When she returned to the penthouse that evening, Junwoo was waiting. He stood in the living room, still in his work clothes, but his jacket was off, his tie loosened. The setting sun cast shadows across his features, making him look more dangerous than ever. "Did you enjoy Hongdae?" he asked quietly. Mariah froze. "You had me followed. You're always followed. You're my wife." "In name only," she shot back, finding her courage. "You don't get to control me." He moved then, crossing the distance between them with predatory grace. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "Who was he?" "None of your business." Junwoo's jaw tightened. For the first time since they'd met, she saw real emotion break through his control, something dark and possessive that made her heart race. "Everything about you is my business, Mariah. You wear my ring. You live in my home. You carry my name. I didn't choose any of it." The words hung between them like a blade. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor. He stepped back, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "No," he said softly. "You didn't." He left without another word, and Mariah collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking. She told herself it was fear. She told herself she hated him. She told herself the heat in her chest when he'd stood so close was nothing but anger. Later that night, she found a package outside her door. Inside was a book, a collection of Korean folktales translated into English. No note, but she knew who it was from. She hated that her fingers traced the cover gently before she could stop herself. The next day, Junwoo appeared at breakfast. He sat across from her in silence, reading his tablet while she picked at her food. The domesticity of it was surreal. "I have a charity event tonight," he said without looking up. "You'll accompany me." It wasn't a question. That evening, she found a dress in her room. Deep emerald silk that hugged her curves perfectly. Diamond jewelry. Shoes that probably cost more than her education. She stared at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. When she emerged, Junwoo was waiting in the foyer. He went completely still when he saw her, his eyes darkening as they traveled slowly down her body and back up. The look lasted only a moment before his mask slid back into place, but Mariah felt it like a physical touch. "Beautiful," he murmured, offering his arm. The gala was a revelation. Seoul's elite filled the ballroom, and every single person showed Junwoo deference that bordered on fear. But when he introduced Mariah as his wife, his hand settled possessively on her lower back, warm through the silk. She felt eyes on them, curious, judgmental, envious. By the end of the evening, she understood something crucial. Seo Junwoo wasn't just wealthy or connected. He was power itself in this city, dangerous and untouchable. And she was his weakness. The following morning, everything changed. Mariah woke to shouting and the sound of breaking glass. She rushed from her room to find Junwoo in the living area, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression murderous. Blood stained his white shirt. "Junwoo!" He turned, saw her, and whatever he saw in her face made him end the call. "Go back to your room." "You're hurt. It's not my blood." He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. Listen to me carefully. Pack a bag. Now. Minho will take you to the safe house. What's happening? Someone tried to kill me tonight. They failed. His eyes burned into hers. But they know about you now. You're not safe here. Fear iced through her veins. I don't understand. You don't need to. He released her, already moving toward his office. You just need to trust me. Why should I trust you? You bought me like property. Junwoo stopped, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because, despite everything, I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you. Now go. A few hours later, Mariah found herself in a high-rise apartment in Gangnam with Minho and 2 other guards. Junwoo had disappeared into whatever war was unfolding. She didn't hear from him for 3 days. On the 4th day, he appeared. He looked exhausted, his suit rumpled, a cut healing on his jaw. He dismissed the guards with a gesture and stood in the doorway, just looking at her. It's handled, he said finally. What's handled? What happened? He moved into the room, poured himself a drink from the bar. Rival family. They thought taking you would give them leverage. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. They were wrong. Mariah's legs felt weak. They wanted to kidnap me? They're dead now. He said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it took a moment for the words to register. He turned to face her, and she saw something raw in his expression. This is my world, Mariah. Blood and violence and power. I tried to keep you separate from it. But I was naive. Being my wife makes you a target. Then let me go, she whispered. Divorce me. Send me back to London. His eyes flashed. No. Why not? He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Because you're mine, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Because from the moment you walked into my life, everything changed. Because I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep imagining you safe and happy. Because I've killed men for looking at you too long, and I'd do it again without hesitation. Mariah's breath caught. You're obsessed. Yes. No denial, no shame. Completely. Something electric crackled between them. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to move away, before his fingers brushed her cheek. His touch was gentle despite the violence he'd just confessed to. I never wanted a wife, he continued, his thumb tracing her jawline. I never wanted to feel this way. Like I'd tear the world apart if anything happened to you. But here we are. You don't know me, she managed, though her voice wavered. Then let me. His forehead rested against hers, his breath warm on her lips. Let me know every part of you. Let me earn what I took. The following week, things shifted. Junwoo didn't disappear anymore. He worked from home, his office door open. He asked about her day over dinner. He brought her books in English, showed her his favorite places in Seoul, and taught her Korean phrases, while his eyes lingered on her mouth. He courted her like they hadn't been forced together, and Mariah felt her walls cracking. One evening, they walked through a traditional garden at sunset. Junwoo's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Tell me about London, he said. Tell me who you were before. So she did. She told him about her art history degree, her dreams of working in museums, her tiny flat and her friendships, and the life she'd been building. He listened as every word mattered, asked questions, and remembered details. You'll finish your degree here, he said when she was done. Seoul National University has an excellent program. I'll arrange it. Junwoo, let me give you this. His grip on her hand tightened. Let me give you back something I helped take away. By the end of the month, she was enrolled. She spent her days in lectures and libraries, her evenings with a husband who watched her like she was the most fascinating thing in his world. He drove her to campus himself, waited outside her classes, and scared away anyone who looked at her too long. "You're being ridiculous," she told him one afternoon, finding him glaring at a classmate who'd asked to borrow her notes. That boy wants more than notes. He's 20 years old and terrified of you. Junwoo's smile was sharp. Good. Later that night, she found him in his office, working late. She brought him tea, set it on his desk. He looked up, surprised, and something soft entered his expression. "You don't have to take care of me," he said. "I know." She perched on the edge of his desk. "But you look tired." His hand found her thigh, thumb stroking gentle circles through her jeans. "I am tired. Tired of sleeping in separate rooms. Tired of pretending I don't want you so badly it's destroying me." Heat flooded through her. "Junwoo. But I'll wait." His eyes met hers, dark with wanting. "Until you want me back. Until you choose me freely." The next day, a man approached her on campus. He was Korean, well-dressed, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Seo," he said in English. "I wondered when I'd get to meet you." Something about him set her nerves on edge. "Do I know you?" "Not yet. But your husband and I are old friends." He stepped closer. "Tell him Lee Ji-sung sends his regards." Min-ho was there in an instant, stepping between them. The man laughed, raised his hands in mock surrender, and walked away. But Mariah couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had just been set in motion. That evening, when she told Junwoo, his face went blank with rage. "He approached you? On campus? Who is he?" "Someone who should know better." He pulled out his phone, barked orders in Korean. When he hung up, he looked at her with barely controlled fury. "You don't leave the penthouse without me. Not until this is resolved. I have classes. I don't care." He gripped her shoulders. "Ji-sung isn't just a rival. He's the one who ordered the hit on me. The one who wanted you taken. And if he's bold enough to approach you in public, he's planning something worse." Fear prickled down her spine. "What does he want?" "To destroy me. And he knows the fastest way to do that is through you." A few days later, Junwoo threw a private party at the penthouse. A show of strength, he explained, to remind everyone who held power. Mariah wore red silk, her curls swept up, her curves on display. She felt Junwoo's eyes on her all night, dark and possessive. When a business associate lingered too long in conversation with her, asking invasive questions about how she and Junwoo met, Junwoo appeared at her side. His arm slid around her waist, pulling her against him. "My wife is tired," he said pleasantly, though his eyes promised violence. "Excuse us." He led her to his private office, locked the door, and pressed her against it. His hands framed her face, his body trapping hers. "Do you have any idea what it does to me?" he asked roughly. "Watching other men look at you? Touch you, even innocently? I want to break every hand that gets near you." "You're jealous," she breathed, insanely. His thumb brushed her bottom lip. "You're mine, Mariah. Mine to protect. Mine to worship. Mine to—" He broke off, breathing hard. "Tell me to stop." She should. She should push him away. Remember, this started with force and obligation. But her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. "What if I don't want you to stop?" The sound he made was pure male satisfaction. His mouth found hers, and the kiss was everything she'd been denying herself. Hungry, desperate, perfect. She melted into him, her curves molding against his hard body, her fingers threading through his hair. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the couch. His jacket came off, then his tie, his hands trembling slightly as they traced her body with reverent worship. "Are you sure?" he asked against her throat, his voice wrecked. "Because once I have you, Mariah, I'll never let you go. Not ever." "I'm sure," she whispered. Mariah woke alone. The office was dark, a blanket tucked around her, her dress draped over the chair. Panic seized her chest. He'd left. After everything. After she'd given herself to him completely. He'd The door opened. Junwoo entered carrying coffee, still shirtless, his hair mussed. When he saw she was awake, his whole face softened. "Good morning, beautiful." Relief and something warmer flooded through her. "I thought you left." "Never." He set the coffee down, gathered her into his arms. "I told you, I'm never letting you go." The following morning, reality crashed back. She woke in his bed, their bed now, to find him already dressed, his expression grim as he read his phone. "What's wrong?" He looked up, and she saw real fear in his eyes. "Ji-sung made his move. He's challenging me publicly, claiming I'm weak because I married you, that I've lost focus." He set down the phone. "There's going to be a meeting tonight. All the families. I have to go." "Then I'm going with you." "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "I'm not letting you walk into danger alone." They argued for an hour, but Mariah wouldn't budge. Finally, Junwoo relented, though his jaw stayed tight with tension. That evening, she dressed in understated elegance, armor in the form of a black dress. Junwoo watched her prepare with dark eyes. "Stay close to me," he ordered. "No matter what happens, you stay at my side." The meeting took place in a private club in Gangnam. Every dangerous man in Seoul seemed to be present, power and menace filling the room like smoke. Ji-sung sat at the head table, his smile cold when they entered. "Seo Junwoo," he called out. And the bride, how domestic. Junwoo's hand tightened on Mariah's back. "Careful, Ji-sung." "Or what? You'll start a war over a woman?" Ji-sung stood, addressing the room. "Look at him." The feared Seo Junwoo, brought low by a pretty face. He's weak now, distracted. It's time for new leadership. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mariah felt Junwoo's barely controlled fury radiating off him. She did something reckless then. She stepped forward, away from his protective hold, and faced Ji-sung directly. "You're wrong," she said clearly. "You think love makes him weak? You're a fool. He's more dangerous now than he's ever been because he has something to protect. Someone worth fighting for." She turned to the room. Any man can rule through fear. It takes a stronger man to rule through loyalty and love. That's why you follow him. That's why you'll never follow someone like Ji-sung, who doesn't understand that strength comes from what we protect, not what we destroy. Silence. Then, slowly, one man began to clap. Then another. Within moments, the room filled with applause. Ji-sung's face went purple with rage. Junwoo pulled Mariah back against him, his arm like iron around her waist. "The lady has spoken," he said softly, his voice carrying despite its quietness. "Anyone who disagrees can face me directly. Right now." No one moved. Ji-sung's support crumbled in an instant. He stood alone, defeated not by violence, but by Mariah's words and Junwoo's unwavering power. Later, in the car, Junwoo pulled Mariah into his lap. "That was the most terrifying and arousing thing I've ever witnessed," he said against her neck. "Don't ever do it again." She laughed, drunk on adrenaline and victory. "I defended my husband." "Your husband." He pulled back to look at her. "Say it again." "My husband," she whispered, and kissed him deeply. The next morning, news spread through Seoul's underground. Lee Ji-sung had disappeared. No one asked questions. Everyone understood. Cross Seo Junwoo, threaten his wife, and vanish. Mariah should have been horrified. Instead, she felt only safety. A few weeks later, Junwoo took her to Jeju Island for what he called a honeymoon, though they were already married. They stayed in a private villa overlooking the ocean, spent days exploring and nights wrapped in each other, learning every inch and secret. "I love you," he told her one evening as the sun set over the water. "I know I never said it before. I wasn't sure I was capable. But I love you, Mariah, completely, eternally." Tears burned her eyes. "I love you too, even though you're impossible and overprotective and slightly terrifying." He grinned. Only slightly? By the end of the month, she moved her things into his bedroom permanently. The penthouse became a home instead of a prison. She finished her degree with honors, Junwoo attending her graduation like a proud husband, cameras capturing the notorious mafia boss applauding his wife. The following spring, during a quiet dinner at home, Junwoo got down on one knee. Mariah stared at him in confusion. "We're already married." "I know." He opened a box, revealing a stunning diamond ring, nothing like the simple band he'd given her that first night. "But you never chose me. Not really. So I'm asking now, properly. Mariah Sterling, will you marry me again? Will you choose me freely, knowing everything, and let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you?" She was crying now, nodding frantically. "Yes. Always. Yes." They renewed their vows a month later in a small, private ceremony. Real this time. Chosen. With friends and family. And promises spoken from the heart. When Junwoo kissed his bride, every person in the room felt the love radiating from them. 6 months later, Mariah stood in the penthouse bathroom, staring at a positive pregnancy test. Terror and joy warred in her chest. When Junwoo found her, he took one look at the test and swept her into his arms. "A baby," he breathed, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked nervously. He set her down gently, his hands framing her face. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed. Absolutely. But happy? He kissed her softly. "I didn't know I could be this happy until I met you." 9 months later, as Mariah lay in the hospital bed, holding their newborn daughter, Junwoo sat beside her looking shell-shocked. "She's perfect," he whispered, his finger tracing their baby's tiny hand. "You're perfect." "We did well," Mariah agreed, exhausted, but glowing. He kissed her forehead. "You did all the work. I just stood here panicking," she laughed. "You were very supportive in your panic." Their daughter, Minji, became the center of their world. Junwoo, the feared mafia boss, turned to absolute mush around his baby girl. Mariah would find him in the nursery at 3 a.m., just watching her sleep, his expression full of wonder and fierce protectiveness. "I never knew I could love like this," he confessed one night. "First you, now her. You've made me into someone I never thought I could be." "You were always this person," Mariah said softly. "You just needed someone to see it." 2 years after their forced marriage, on the anniversary of that first terrible night, Junwoo threw a massive party. Seoul's elite filled their penthouse, but he only had eyes for Mariah as he stood and raised his glass. "2 years ago," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "I made a business arrangement that I thought meant nothing. I was wrong. I gained everything." He looked directly at Mariah, love shining in his eyes. "My wife, my daughter, my entire world. Thank you, Mariah, for choosing me back, for seeing past the monster everyone else sees, and finding the man underneath." Mariah crossed to him, took his hand, and addressed their guests. 2 years ago I was 18, and terrified, forced into a marriage I didn't want. But I learned something important. Sometimes, the best love stories start in darkness. Sometimes the man you fear becomes the man you can't live without. Junwoo gave me everything. Safety, freedom, love, family. He's my home. They kissed as the room erupted in applause, and Mariah felt the final pieces of her old fear fall away. She had been forced into this marriage, yes, but she stayed by choice. She loved by choice, and she would choose him every single day for the rest of her life. The peace lasted 3 years. Mariah finished her master's degree and began working at Seoul's National Museum, her dream finally realized. Junwoo had consolidated his power, becoming not just feared, but respected, even legitimate in certain circles. Minji grew into a precocious child who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. But darkness always finds a way back. It started with small things. A car following Mariah to work. Strange calls to their home. Gifts left outside the penthouse. Beautiful, expensive, threatening in their intimacy, because only someone watching closely would know what to send. Junwoo doubled security, but Mariah saw the tension returning to his shoulders, the cold calculation entering his eyes. "Talk to me," she demanded one night after Minji was asleep. "What's happening?" He poured himself a drink, stared out at the Seoul skyline. Ji-sung had a brother. Younger, more reckless. He's been building power in Japan, and now he's come back to settle scores. Lee Ji-hyun, Mariah said, remembering the name from whispered conversations. "Yes." Junwoo turned to face her. "He blames me for his brother's death. He wants revenge, and he's smart enough to know the best way to hurt me is through you and Minji." Fear iced through her. "What do we do?" "I end this." His expression went hard. Permanently. The following week, tensions escalated. Someone attempted to grab Minji from her private school. They failed, thanks to the security team, but Mariah's world tilted on its axis. She held her crying daughter that night, breathing in her baby shampoo scent, while Junwoo made calls in his office, his voice cold and lethal. When he emerged hours later, he looked like the man she'd first met. Dangerous, untouchable, terrifying. He knelt before where she sat on the couch, took her hands. "I'm sending you and Minji to the countryside. There's a property, heavily secured. You'll be safe there while I handle this." "No." Mariah's voice was firm despite her fear. "We stay together. We're a family, Junwoo. We don't run." "Mariah." "No." She cupped his face. "I won't raise our daughter to fear. We fight this together, or we don't fight at all. You taught me to be strong. Let me be strong now." Something shifted in his eyes. Pride, love, resignation. "You're impossible." "I learned from the best." They compromised. Minji went to the countryside with Mariah's mother, who'd moved to Korea the previous year. Mariah stayed, refusing to leave Junwoo's side. The penthouse became a fortress. Business moved elsewhere. Every night, Junwoo held her like she might disappear. "When this is over," he said one night, his face buried in her neck, "we're taking a vacation. Somewhere peaceful. Somewhere no one knows my name. I'd go anywhere with you," she whispered back. The confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday. Ji-hyun requested a meeting. Neutral ground, just the two of them. It was obviously a trap, but Junwoo agreed anyway. Mariah fought him on it, but he was immovable. "This ends tonight," he told her, already dressed, armed, his expression set. "One way or another." "Then I'm coming." "No." He gripped her shoulders. "If something happens to me, you take Minji and you run. There's money, documents, everything you need in the safe. You disappear and you never look back." "Junwoo." He kissed her, hard and desperate. "Promise me. Promise you'll protect our daughter." "I promise," she whispered against his lips. "But you're coming back to us. You have to." He left without another word. Mariah stood at the window, watching his car disappear into the rainy Seoul night, her hand pressed against the glass, fear eating her alive. Hours passed. No word. Mariah wore a path in the carpet, her phone clutched in her hand. Minho stood nearby, equally tense, his own phone silent. The other guards moved through the penthouse like shadows. At midnight, the call came. But not from Junwoo, from the hospital. Mariah's world stopped. She heard words like stabbed, and surgery, and critical condition, through a haze of terror. Minho drove her through rain-slicked streets, while she prayed to every god she'd ever heard of. The hospital was in chaos. Police, Junwoo's associates, and reporters were held back by security. Mariah pushed through them all, her clothes soaked, her heart in her throat. A doctor met her outside the surgical wing. "Mrs. SEO, your husband is in surgery. The next few hours are critical." What happened? He was stabbed multiple times. He's lost a lot of blood, but he's fighting. He's strong. Mariah collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking. Minho appeared with coffee she couldn't drink. Associates came and went, their faces grim. She caught fragments of conversations. Ji-hyun was dead, killed by Junwoo before he collapsed. The threat was over. But at what cost? 6 hours later, the surgeon emerged. He made it through surgery. The next 24 hours will tell us more, but he's stable for now. You can see him briefly. Mariah followed the doctor on trembling legs. The ICU was all machines and sterile white walls. And there, in the bed, pale and still, but breathing, was her husband. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, but he was alive. She took his hand carefully, mindful of the IV. "I'm here," she whispered. "Minji and I are waiting for you. You promised to come back to us, so you'd better keep that promise, Seo Junwoo." His fingers twitched in hers. Not much, but enough. The next 3 days were the longest of Mariah's life. She lived at the hospital, leaving only to video call Minji and assure her daughter that Daddy would be home soon. She slept in the chair beside Junwoo's bed, holding his hand, talking to him about everything and nothing. On the 4th day, he woke up. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then landed on her. "Mariah," he rasped. She burst into tears, laughing and crying simultaneously. "You scared me." "Sorry." His thumb brushed her hand weakly. "Minji. Safe, waiting for you." She leaned down carefully, kissed his forehead. "Ji-hyun." "Dead. It's over." His eyes closed briefly. "I kept my promise. Came back to you." "Barely," she said, but relief made her voice shake. His recovery was slow. Junwoo, who used to control everything, became a terrible patient. He complained about the hospital, the food, and the restrictions. But he softened whenever Mariah or Minji visited, their daughter chattering about her time in the countryside, while he listened like she was reciting poetry. A month later, he came home. Thinner, scarred, but alive. Minji launched herself into his arms the moment he walked through the door, and Junwoo held her as he'd never let go, tears streaming down his face. That night, after Minji was asleep, Mariah helped him to their bedroom. He moved slowly, still healing, but when she tried to leave and let him rest, he caught her hand. "Stay," he said quietly. She climbed into bed beside him carefully, mindful of his injuries. He pulled her close despite the discomfort it must have caused, his face buried in her hair. "I thought I'd never hold you again," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "When Ji-hyun's blade went in, all I could think about was you and Minji, that I'd broken my promise, that you'd be alone. But you didn't break it." She tilted her head to look at him, her fingers tracing his jaw gently. "You fought. You survived. You came back to us. I'll always come back to you," he whispered, "even if I have to crawl out of hell itself." The following weeks brought change. Junwoo began stepping back from the darker aspects of his empire, delegating to trusted associates, focusing on legitimate business. "I almost left you a widow," he explained when Mariah questioned the shift. "I almost made Minji fatherless. I won't risk that again." "You're leaving the Mafia?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "Transitioning. It'll take time, years, maybe. But yes." He took her hand, pressed it to his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. "My family is worth more than power. You're worth more than any empire." Mariah felt tears burn her eyes. "I love you. I love you more than life itself." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for choosing to stay with me, even when it was dangerous, even when it was terrifying." "I'd choose you in every lifetime," she promised. By the end of that year, Junwoo had indeed stepped back significantly. He kept interests in legitimate businesses, real estate, technology, hospitality. But the criminal enterprise was passed to carefully selected successors, with strict rules about family being off limits. Souls underground whispered about Seo Jun-woo going soft, domesticated, but those who knew better understood the truth. He hadn't gone soft. He'd simply found something worth more than power. And a man who'd burned down his enemies to protect his family was still the most dangerous man in the city. The following spring, Mariah discovered she was pregnant again. She told Jun-woo over breakfast, sliding the test across the table with shaking hands. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at her with such naked joy that her breath caught. "Another baby," he said, wonderingly. "Are you happy?" "Terrified and happy," she admitted. "You?" He stood, pulled her into his arms. "Same, but mostly happy. Mostly grateful that I get to do this again with you." Minji was ecstatic about becoming a big sister. She talked to Mariah's growing belly constantly, telling her future sibling about all the things they'd do together. Jun-woo watched these moments with an expression of pure contentment, so different from the cold mafia boss she'd first met. "What are you thinking?" Mariah asked one evening, catching him watching her read to Minji. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," he said simply. "That I don't deserve you, or any of this, but I'm selfish enough to keep it anyway." Their son, Jun-ho, arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Jun-woo cried when the doctor placed his son in his arms, this tiny, perfect human that he and Mariah had created. Minji peered at her brother with solemn eyes, then declared him acceptable. Life settled into a rhythm of domestic bliss, punctuated by the occasional reminder of Jun-woo's past. But he handled threats swiftly and decisively, always ensuring his family remained untouched. His reputation still preceded him. Whispers of the man who'd killed dozens to protect his wife and children kept most trouble at bay. Mariah thrived in her museum career, eventually becoming a curator. She organized exhibitions celebrating African and Korean cultural exchanges, building bridges between communities. Jun-woo attended every opening, proud and supportive, his arm around her waist, his eyes promising death to anyone who disrespected his wife. On their 5th wedding anniversary, the real one, from their vow renewal, Jun-woo surprised her with a trip to Ghana, her ancestral homeland. They spent 2 weeks exploring her heritage, Jun-woo fascinated by everything, asking endless questions. On a beach at sunset, he pulled her close. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said, "for letting me into every part of your life." "You're my husband," she said simply. "My partner. Everything I am, I share with you. Even when I was a bastard who bought you like property," she smiled. "Especially then, because you proved that people can change. That love can transform even the hardest heart." He kissed her as the sun set over the Atlantic, and Mariah thought about how far they'd come. From that terrified 18-year-old girl and the cold 40-year-old mafia boss to this. Parents, partners, best friends, lovers. The journey had been dark and dangerous, but every scar was worth it. A few years later, Minji was 8, and Jun-ho was 3 when Mariah found out she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with complications. The doctors labeled it high risk due to her age and the baby's position. Jun-woo became impossibly overprotective, hovering constantly, driving her to every appointment, researching obsessively. "I'm going to be fine," she assured him repeatedly. "You don't know that." His fear was palpable. "I can't lose you, Mariah. I can't. You won't." She took his face in her hands. "I'm strong. We're strong. And we're going to meet this baby together." The pregnancy was difficult. Bed rest for the final 2 months. Mariah chafed at the restrictions, but Jun-woo enforced them ruthlessly. He worked from home, orchestrated everything from her bedside, brought her books and food and affection in endless supply. Minji would curl up beside her mother, reading aloud from her school books. Jun-ho, not understanding why mommy couldn't play, brought her his toys and drawings, and Junwoo held her every night, his hand on her belly, feeling their daughter kick. "She's a fighter," the doctor said during an ultrasound, "just like her parents." The delivery was complicated, an emergency C-section that had Junwoo pacing the waiting room like a caged animal. Minho had to physically restrain him from bursting into the operating room. When the doctor finally emerged, Junwoo looked ready to collapse. "Mother and daughter are both healthy," the doctor said, smiling. "You can see them now." Junwoo rushed to the recovery room. Mariah lay there, exhausted, but glowing, their newborn daughter in her arms. "Meet Amara Minseo," she said softly. "Our little miracle." He took his daughter carefully, staring down at her tiny face in wonder. "She's perfect. You're perfect." He looked at Mariah, tears streaming freely. "Thank you. Thank you to our family. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for everything." Later, when Mariah had fallen asleep and baby Amara was in the nursery, Junwoo stood at the window, watching the Seoul skyline. Minho approached quietly. "Congratulations, sir." "Thank you." Junwoo's reflection showed a man transformed from who he'd been a decade ago. "It's strange, isn't it? I spent so many years building an empire of fear. Now, my greatest achievement is 3 children and a wife who chose to love me, despite everything." "She saw the truth of you," Minho said. "What you were always capable of becoming." Junwoo nodded slowly. "I would have destroyed the world for power once. Now, I'd destroy it for them, for her smile, for Minji's laugh, for Junho's questions, for Amara's future. That's real power." The family of 5 fell into a new rhythm. Their penthouse was filled with noise and chaos and love. Minji excelled in school, showing interest in both art, like her mother, and business, like her father. Junho was a tiny hurricane of energy and curiosity. And Amara, when she grew old enough to have a personality, proved to be as fierce and determined as her namesake, a bittersweet princess who commanded attention. On Mariah's 30th birthday, Junwoo threw a massive party. But the real gift came later. When they were alone on the terrace, the city lights spread below them. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside were documents, legal papers transferring half of everything he owned into her name. Properties, businesses, investments, a fortune. "Junwoo, this is yours. It was always yours, but now it's legal." He took her hands. "You saved me, Mariah. You took a man who was barely human and taught him how to live, how to love, how to be worth something beyond fear and violence. Everything I have exists because you gave me a reason to want more than power." She was crying now, overwhelmed. "I didn't do anything special. I just loved you. That was everything." He wiped her tears gently. "You loved a monster and found a man. You're my redemption, my salvation, my entire world." They renewed their vows again on their 10th anniversary, this time in Ghana, with both families present. Minji served as maid of honor, Junho as ring bearer, baby Amara as the flower girl who ate more petals than she scattered. When Junwoo promised to love, honor, and cherish Mariah for the rest of his days, no one doubted he meant every word. Because Seoul's most feared man had proven over a decade of devotion that love could indeed transform darkness into light. Years passed in a blur of school plays and business meetings, family dinners, and occasional threats from the past that Junwoo handled with swift efficiency. He never fully left his former world. Men like him never could. But he'd built walls between that life and his family that nothing could breach. Minji graduated high school at 16, brilliant and ambitious. She announced her intention to study international business and criminal justice, wanting to understand both sides of her father's world. Junwoo tried to dissuade her, but Mariah understood. "She's our daughter," Mariah told him. "She has your strength and my heart. Let her find her own path." What if that path leads to danger? Then we'll be there to guide her through it. She touched his face. Like we've guided each other. Junho, at 13, showed surprising artistic talent. Painting, sculpture, music. He was sensitive and thoughtful, the gentle balance to his father's intensity. Amara, at 10, was already showing signs of inheriting Junwoo's strategic mind and Mariah's passionate nature. The combination was formidable. On their 15th anniversary, Mariah and Junwoo took a rare trip alone, a week in Jeju Island, returning to where they'd honeymooned. They walked the same beaches, stayed in the same villa, remembered who they'd been, and marveled at who they'd become. "Do you ever regret it?" Junwoo asked one evening, watching the sunset. "The way we started? Being forced into this?" Mariah considered carefully. "I regret the fear, the lack of choice in that moment. But I don't regret where it led us. I can't regret our children, our life, our love. Even knowing what I was, what I'm still capable of." She turned to face him fully. "Especially knowing that. Because you chose to be better. Not for yourself, but for us. That choice means everything." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I love you more now than I did yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's my promise for however many years we have left." "Forever then," she whispered. "We have forever." When they returned to Seoul, they found Min-ji had been accepted to Harvard, Junho had won a national art competition, and Amara had gotten into a minor scrape at school, defending a friend from bullies. Junwoo handled each situation with the perfect blend of pride, support, and discipline that fatherhood had taught him. "Our life is chaos," Mariah observed one evening, watching Junwoo help Junho with a painting while Amara practiced piano and Min-ji video-called from Cambridge. "Beautiful chaos," he corrected, pulling her into his side. "The best kind." 20 years after that forced marriage, on Mariah's 38th birthday, Junwoo gathered the family for what he called an important announcement. The children, now adults, or nearly so, gathered curiously. "Your mother and I have decided something," he began, holding Mariah's hand. "I'm retiring, completely. From all businesses, legitimate and otherwise." Shocked silence. "We're buying a house in the countryside," Mariah continued. "Something peaceful, where your father can finally rest, and I can paint, and we can just be." "What about the company?" Min-ji asked, ever practical. "It's yours if you want it," Junwoo said. "All the legitimate businesses. Everything else is being dissolved or transferred. My legacy doesn't need to be power or fear anymore. It's you three. It's the family we built." Junho grinned. "Does this mean I can tell people my dad is retired Mafia?" "Absolutely not," Junwoo and Mariah said simultaneously, and the whole family burst into laughter. The move happened gradually. They kept the Seoul penthouse for when the children visited, but the countryside house became home. It had gardens where Mariah painted, and Junwoo learned to grow vegetables. They hosted Sunday dinners that the whole family attended without fail. They traveled, explored, made up for lost time and youth stolen by circumstances. On their 25th anniversary, Junwoo, now 65 but still striking, his hair silver at the temples, stood before Mariah in their garden and spoke from the heart. 25 years ago, I made a business deal that changed my life. I gained a wife, a family, a reason to be more than what I was. You took a man who dealt in death and fear and taught him about life and love. Every day with you has been a gift I never deserved, but will spend eternity being grateful for." Mariah, 43 and still beautiful, her curves softer with age, but her eyes bright with happiness, smiled through tears. "You took a frightened girl and showed her she was strong. You gave me children, a home, and a love story that started in darkness, but lives in light. I wouldn't change a single moment. Their children and grandchildren, Minji had 2 children now, married to a human rights lawyer, surrounded them. 3 generations born from a forced marriage that became the greatest love story any of them knew. As the sun set over their garden, Junwoo pulled Mariah into his arms and danced to music only they could hear. And in that moment, wrapped in each other and surrounded by family, they were simply 2 people who'd found forever in the most unexpected way. Because sometimes the darkest beginnings lead to the brightest endings. Sometimes, the man you are forced to marry becomes the man you choose every single day. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really does conquer all. 30 years after that fateful night, Mariah stood in Seoul's National Museum of Modern Art, surrounded by her life's work. The exhibition was titled From Darkness to Light, a journey of love and transformation, featuring paintings she'd created over 3 decades of marriage. Junwoo, now 70 and distinguished, stood beside her, his arm around her waist in the possessive gesture that had become second nature. Their children mingled through the crowd with their own families. Minji's daughter looked remarkably like her grandmother. Junho's twins were causing gentle chaos. Amara, pregnant with her first child, glowed beside her husband. A young reporter approached nervously. "Mrs. Seo, your work is stunning. The exhibition tells such a powerful story. Can you talk about the inspiration?" Mariah glanced at her husband, saw the love in his eyes that had never dimmed, never wavered in 3 decades. "It's about transformation," she said simply. "About how love can take something broken and make it whole. How the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures if you're brave enough to hold on." "And your husband?" the reporter asked. "He's quite notorious in certain circles, even in retirement." Junwoo's eyes went cold, but Mariah squeezed his hand. "My husband," she said clearly, "is the best man I know. He's been my partner, my protector, my greatest love for 30 years. Whatever he was before, he chose to become something better. That's all that matters." Later, alone in their countryside home, Junwoo held Mariah on the porch swing, watching stars emerge over fields they'd planted together. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he'd posed countless times over the years. "Not a single one," she answered, the same response she always gave. "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He kissed her temple. "That I wasted 40 years of my life before you walked into it. Then we'll just have to make the next 40 count." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You plan on keeping me around that long?" "Longer, if I can manage it." She tilted her head to look at him. "Forever sounds about right." "Forever it is then," he agreed, and kissed her as the stars bore witness to a love that had survived everything. Force, fear, danger, time, and emerged victorious. Because they'd chosen each other, every single day, for 3 decades. And they'd keep choosing each other for however many days remained. That was the real happy ending. Not the fairy tale moment, but the daily choice to love, to stay, to build something beautiful from broken beginnings. And in the end, wasn't that the greatest love story of all?